So I just want to give you a little information about what you need to develop your second draft and what I expect in the form of in-text citations for the CSE name year method. So as I've indicated to you before, your second draft should be in the range of 7 to 8 pages. So we're talking about having most of the content. As you remember, this should be 7 to 8 pages of 1.5 spaced text. And by this point, you start adding your figures and tables, remembering that they do not count the 7 to 8 pages of content. And you start referencing in the text so that I can see what your sources are and that you're starting to really fully develop the paper. In-text citations in the CSE name year method appear at the end of the sentence, usually where the topic is first introduced. They are, for the introduction, you don't have to give references for all of your information. Obviously, if it's something that's fairly well understood by a broad range of people, then you don't need to reference it. But as soon as you start getting into specialized information that you think that a student in a different concentration in science would understand, then you need to start referencing. So say you put the citation at the end of this first sentence, and then if you're continuing to talk about information from that same source, so you might use just one source for the whole way through a paragraph about some background part of information, then you do not need to reference every single sentence, but you should repeat your citation at the end of the paragraph. And that will sort of indicate the whole paragraph has come from that one source. That is not the ideal way to reference, I will say in passing. It's better to have multiple sources for your introductory information, but I will most of the time accept a single source for at least a paragraph, not for like 4 pages of introduction, but for different aspects of introduction, you could just have one source. Similarly, when you're referencing your research paper, it may well be that you have 1 or 2 paragraphs about the information from a single paper. You, again, can just cite it at the first sentence in the paragraph, the end of the paragraph. However, if in the mid-paragraph you change source, then you must give the new reference, new citation. And when you go back to the original one, you must then recite the original one. So it must be clear all along where any particular piece of information was gathered. The in-text method for CSE is if it is a single author, you just put surname and year. For example, parentheses, Rodriguez 2020, close parentheses. Notice no comma, no punctuation. It's just Rodriguez space 2020. If there are 2 authors, then you use surname and surname year. So, for example, parentheses, Thompson and Agari, no comma, just a space, 2018, close parentheses. There's not supposed to be a space there if there is one. 3 or more authors, then you use the first surname et al. And the date. So, for example, Wong et al. But notice in this case, there is a stop after all. So it's Wong et al. Stop space 2021. Okay, so those are relatively easy. Online sources are a little more difficult, as they always are in this kind of referencing. But the standard way of doing this is you use the title of the web page and then the date. So, for example, US forestry surface stream temperatures 2010 to 2020, space 2021. Now that's really rather long. And it is acceptable to cut this title down into just a few words that will allow a reader to identify that particular reference in your reference list. So if there was no other references, web page references to a US Forestry Service page, you could just put US Forestry 2021, and that would be sufficient for a reader to go and find that reference in your reference list. What is absolutely crucial is that whatever you put in the parentheses, the beginning of the parentheses, must be the beginning of what is in the reference list. So, I see US Forestry Service here. I go looking in your alphabetical list for US Forestry. If you filed it under stream temperatures, I'm not going to find it. Okay? So you must align your titles in your reference list with the citation in the text. That's the crucial thing in name year. And as I've said just now, your reference list should be in alphabetical order at the end of the paper. So it is in alphabetical order by the surname of the first author or the beginning of the web page name. So by the first letter in the start of the full citation. That's how you alphabetize it. And so that makes it very easy for a reader to just go find a particular reference. Telling you now, I will ultimately, in the final paper, cross-check every reference that is listed at the end of the paper must be cited in your paper. Every citation, in-text citation, that paper must be listed in your reference. So the two must align the whole way through. And I strongly recommend that when you've finished your paper, you go through and the way I do it is I print out the reference list, and I just go through the paper and make doubly sure that every single one that you've mentioned in the text is present in the reference list. And if there's something that's not checked off on the reference list, it never showed up in the paper, I will see it. So it's just another thing like checking your spelling and your green squiggles for grammar and that kind of thing. Checking that your references are correct is just a part of putting in a really good paper. And it is, if you've looked at the paper grading rubric, you'll notice that accurate referencing is quite a substantial chunk of grade. So it's something that is worth doing well. Okay.